Speaking of a wonderful week ahead, women's lacrosse, the road to the Final Four begins. Softball, postseason begins there, and a rivalry brewing in baseball. All that and more in the sports section. It starts right now. And welcome to the sports section, Long Island's longest running call-in sports program. Of course, during COVID, the callers are the hosts. I'm Matt Mankiewich, Ken Fermin, Mike Anderson, and Zach Wilson joining me for 2 hours until midnight. And in case you missed out on all the Seawolves broadcasts this weekend, we were pretty busy. Stony Brook Athletics is pretty busy. And most importantly, we're going to stay busy because women's lacrosse knows where it's going to be this weekend, home. And guys, that's the best news so far.
Yeah, best news and really much what the Steelers were hoping for as a stealing for them this season. Their only two losses entirety were against the top two teams in the country at that point, North Carolina and Syracuse, who are two of the three seeds, the top three in the tournament, who have a first-round bye and will play their next game in the second round. Stony Brook, they are the 8th seed for the second time in school history. This is their 4th top 8 seeding in program history, and they will be having a rematch with the Towson Tigers Friday at 12 p.m. And this time, instead of being at Towson, it's going to be here at Laval Stadium. We saw early this season, Stony Brook defeated Towson 10-8 after it was a very competitive second half. Stony Brook was looking a little troublesome, but the defense was able to pull through in the end, and we're just probably going to expect once again for this to be pretty competitive because that's how this rivalry has always been, as Stony Brook is the one who has always been so dominant, like the football team has against Rhode Island.
Well, the one thing that's very important here is that there's going to be a familiar opponent in the first round. The one thing that we can also count on is that this team's on top of its game right now. And they got caught napping a little bit in the semi in the America East, but did what they had to do to surpass one opponent and then another, facing Albany yet again in the America East final and beating them yet again for their 8th straight championship. But I'll tell you something, for a few minutes during that semi, I was wondering, all winning streaks end. Could this have been the one? Waiting for that goal, waiting for those goals to come, and they finally did. But they had you on pins and needles in that first half.
That's definitely true. You know, going back to that game, UMBC was the one that started off on a run. We were 4 unanswered, 5-1 lead through the first half of that first period. And offensively, they looked good. But I think most impressively was defense was holding up and locking down the star players in Kennedy and O'Miller, and with that suppressing the rest of the offense. So even in the win, really it showed you what it took for Stony Brook to do in order to beat the Retrievers, which was they really piled on the goals. They kept on the onslaught. They scored the most amount of goals in their conference history in a postseason in the win against UMBC. But it's also the most they've allowed against UMBC in the conference program history of 13.
Yeah, it was really something that Stony Brook didn't really expect too much to start off with. But this is really what Joe Spallina has been able to show on his opponents, that every time it seems like the opponent who has been pretty much at the same level or a little less than Stony Brook that has gotten a chance to show off on them and probably have a chance for an upset, that's when the Steelwolves respond hard and making their opponents pay the price by getting massacred.
Yeah, again, 25 goals, the most for the Seawolves in conference history in a postseason game, one of the most, I believe, in program history. I mean, absolutely remarkable showing by them. And I think that was the kickstart they needed in that postseason to really get it going in the American East tournament. Because something to note against the Great Danes in the finals is, unlike last year, they never trailed. They got off. It was a slow start, yes. For both teams, it was a very tug-of-war battle defensively, but the Seawolves never faltered. They led from virtually the opening draw, and by halftime, they were up 9-4. And while 16-9 is on the lower scale of games played this season, again, it goes to show that Stony Brook can beat you, again, in so many ways, whether it's by piling on the scoring offensively, getting that 25 goals like they did against UMBC, or by holding the team they're going up against to single digits like they did against UAlbany. And I think that was a great test, too, for going up against Towson, because UMBC and UAlbany are teams they faced 2 and 3 times during the regular and postseason. This will be the second matchup against Towson. And historically, Towson has never cracked the double-digit barrier against Stony Brook, while Stony Brook has never scored less than 10 goals against the Tigers.
Yeah, and we know that history has really been
the
rich.
score was 10-8.
Yeah, I mean, they just barely did it, but again, it goes to show that they got it done.
Yeah, Towson, at that point in the season, they were actually looking pretty decent, believe it or not. They were able to win 13-7 against the Loyola Greyhounds, who were coming off at that point a 12-point loss to Syracuse, and Loyola was the host. I mean, at that point, it seemed like Towson started to feel like that they were invincible and all because they were in the top 20 at that point. But then Stony Brook started to make them come back down to earth, because that's who the Seawolves are pretty much are whenever they face anybody who's not really that often in the top 10. But yeah, Stony Brook using their history to favor them, and it's going to be a lot more when they try and continue to use that history on Friday.
I think previewing this game against Towson for Stony Brook, you got to touch on the key players. I think first, Allie Kennedy. First off, it was the awards. The awards were given out before the preseason, or rather the postseason started. Allie Kennedy earning the Conference Midfielder of the Year award and earning the playoffs Most Outstanding Player award by earning 12 goals in the 2-game tournament, which broke the record Kylie O'Miller set a few seasons ago. And we heard in the broadcast a couple of nights ago how proud she is of Allie Kennedy and for leading this team. And I mean, what a remarkable run the graduate has gone on.
Yeah, very remarkable. She knows that this is her last season, and she wants to go out with a bang. I've said that before, but it's so true, because she has been a big stud, and she really has not disappointed her Josephalina or anybody else on this team, because she is not the only other player that has been rising up. You see Taryn Miller rising up too. You get Kaylin Hart there. You also get some mix of other players who have been flashing from time to time, like Sarah Poulos and Kaylee Huff. And yeah, that makes up a lot of potential threats that Stony Brook's opponents may not be able to keep track of too much.
Yeah, something interesting I want to talk about with everyone here too is Rita Sabella earning co-defensive player honors of the year, sharing it with Clancy Rude. Those two faced off in the finals. Now, we all had someone different tab. I know Matt especially had Claire Levy, her teammate, tab. And it was a bit of a shock that Rita Sabella won that honor. But I think she proved why in the finals that she was capable of earning such accolades.
Yeah, she proved it by being able to show how much she could step up for being a usual midfielder that me and Jim were more accustomed to seeing over the last few years than playing defense. I mean, somebody had to come in when Haley Dillon fell with that injury, so Spalina relied on Sabella, and the rest was history.
And always have to mention that her brother, Michael Sabella, is the defenseman on the men's lacrosse team.
I always love to hear what the bragging rights are on that, because Michael Sabella, as we'll get into later, actually was on the second team all-conference, I believe. And I believe he also earned all-rookie team, but Reina one-upped him by getting co-defensive player of the year honors. But turning to Towson real quick, too, I think it's imperative to note Stony Brook got a great one, too. Towson's right there as well, with Blair Pierre, a sophomore mid, 58 goals, one of the top scorers in the nation, 66 points total, and Lindsay Marshall right behind her with 35 goals and 15 dishes for 50 points. I mean, those two have been remarkable in the attack, in the mid especially. And they're both underclass women, unlike the graduate and senior and Kennedy and O'Miller. These are two young players coming straight out of high school and leading this team to an at-large bid.
Yeah, so we know what we saw out of the top. So who are the top 8 seeds, of course, in the NCAA tournament? North Carolina, Northwestern, and Syracuse, the top 3 who will get that first round bye. Again, I am not surprised at all because kudos to them. They really did their homework against Stony Brook too. And Stony Brook, they seem to do a better job against North Carolina than Syracuse, so maybe this will be a better if instead of playing against the Orange. But some people can speculate about why Duke, because they were 9-7 this year. And believe it or not, I was kind of skeptic at first too, because Duke looking at 9-7 and Stony Brook 14-2, you would think, did the committee start to conspire against Stony Brook again? Are they going controversial again? Well, believe it or not, this time I may not be as perplexed or flabbergasted as I was in 2018 when Stony Brook was number 1 for most of the year, but only got a 5 seed. So, because looking back at Duke's schedule, remember they are part of the ACC, which is one of the top conferences in the nation this year, because North Carolina and Syracuse are also there. And Duke, they played against some really good teams, of course, in North Carolina. The last time they played against the Tar Heels, they were hosting them, and Duke almost won. But North Carolina pulled out by 1. So if you can think about that, while the fact that Duke also lost to Notre Dame in the first round of the ACC tournament by 1, and losing to Boston College by 2, who is a 4 seed in the tournament, you can probably get, if it was pretty close between Stony Brook and Duke for what the seeding would look like, then you could understand that. And some people could also speculate Stony Brook and Florida, because Florida had 2 losses this year. One of them, of course, was against North Carolina, so you had to overlook that. Of course, and
with North Carolina especially, Stony Brook's going to definitely be on their toes again. They know just how hard it is facing the top-ranked team in the nation. Their season debut against North Carolina, and obviously it was a loss. North Carolina looked unstoppable, and obviously it's not a surprise that they were the number 1 seed and are tapped to win in many prediction brackets. And seeing where Stony Brook has lined up on the brackets, assuming they beat Towson on the 14th, they would be likely hosting a second round on the 16th against either Drexel or Rutgers. That's at the bottom half of the bracket. At the top, UNC obviously has a bye for being the 1 seed. So on the 16th, they'd host either JMU or Johns Hopkins. And should they beat those teams, they will likely, and Stony Brook beats Rutgers and Drexel, it will likely be UNC and North Carolina heading in for the quarterfinals matchup.
Yeah, so believe it or not, Stony Brook has actually played 2 times against Towson in the NCAA tournament. The first time that they ever met each other was indeed at College Park in the University of Maryland on May 10th, 2013. That was also a 2-point victory for Stony Brook before they fell 11-3 in the second round to Maryland. And then the next time they faced in the postseason was 2014 on May 9th. This took place at the Carrier Dome in the first round. Stony Brook won that game 10-8. So, and so we continue to look back at also other games that Stony Brook has played in the regular season. We just before talked about their last time they met each other this season was at Towson 10-8. The last time Stony Brook hosted Towson last year, me and Jim were on for that one before the season was unfortunately canceled a week later. Stony Brook hosted, they won 13-8. So pretty much what we see is that Towson has gotten no more than 9 goals in the entire series history, and they average around 8.
Yeah, and that's the key to victory before we wrap up for the discussion. Obviously, for Stony Brook, again, if you're going to hold the opponent to under 10 goals, you're virtually a lock to win. And again, every game, it's been routine, no matter how tightly contested it is, like it was last time out against Towson. As long as you're holding them in single digits, this is an offense that we know is going to score double digits virtually every game. Again, it's a shock when they don't. As we said, really, besides the UNC game and the Syracuse game, this team is scoring at least 15 goals every game. The freaking semifinals, they just scored 25. So the girls, they're on a 12-game win streak. They're on a roll. Absolutely phenomenal job by Kospelina's crew. And I think they're going to have a long chase for that championship title. And again, not to get ahead of ourselves, but these games are obviously important. But the one they have circled on their calendars is that quarterfinal matchup against number 1 UNC in next week. So that is going to be fun to watch. And again, Allie Kennedy, Terrell Miller, this is going to be their last go around because of the last season getting cut. So, much like Kylie O'Miller and Courtney Murphy did, they're going to lay it all on the line and you give it 120% just to try to get a grasp at that NCAA title.
Yes, so I'm looking up who Stony Brook is going to have to be very careful to watch out for against a Towson team that could try and upset them and try and break that drought to Stony Brook. The one who has been looking very stellar so far is Blair Pierre. She is a sophomore for Pikesville, Maryland, and has the most points for Towson this year at 66. She also has the most goals this year at 58. So she's pretty much the Allie Kennedy of her team. But what is going to might help Towson try and get more possessions offensively off of a goal by either team would be the draw control ability of Lindsay Marshall, the freshman from Columbia. She has also been very dominant, has had a season-high 10 draw controls against William & Mary back on April 10th. So Charlotte Verhulst is going to really make sure that she has a good chance to face up well against Marshall if she has been if she is going to be that person that's going to do the draw control battle.
Yeah, well, we're all psyched for the girls lacrosse team. I hope they make this run count, but
they got a lot of talent,
right? And they have the talent to do so. But while we're on the subject of girls sports, there is another women's team for Stony Brook that did not have the same fortunes from this past weekend. So why don't we shift to the softball team, who played their most important series to date this year. They played UMBC in a best-of-3 series on Friday and Saturday, and it was a battle for first place in the America Eastern Conference. Now, the softball team, of course, won a non-league game on Tuesday at St. John's, but that did not affect them whatsoever. That was non-conference. So Game 1 kicked off a doubleheader on Friday to kick off the whole 3-game series. And it really looked promising. It looked like we're going to go right in there and take care of business and secure first place. The offense had one of its best showings this season to start things off. They scored 11 runs on 14 hits in Game 1.
The firepower of their team. Again, the firepower of their team. Again, sluggers and Melissa Robert, who it felt like, you correct me on this, it felt like she was just in singles the past couple weeks,
Yeah, she had been in an extra base hit drought. She hadn't had an extra base hit since April 20th, which was against St. John's. So.
I was gonna point out that I felt like, it was only singles. She got a home run in the game, and it was a big reason why they were the mercy rule UMBC, which is insane. To beat UMBC is difficult enough. Do it in 5 innings on, again, 11 runs, 14 hits. Roberts hitting big. Riley Craig as well, I think 3 for 3 with a double and 3 RBIs.
Yeah.
Everyone was just hitting the ball. And then all of a sudden, Courtney Coppersmith effect happened. And oh boy, did that offense flatline.
Yeah, that completely changed the entire playoff picture in the America East. Game 2 started, and, things were actually looking really good for Stony Brook. Melissa Rarick was the pitcher for Game 2. Of course, she stayed in the 3-hole. You can never take her bat out of the lineup. And as Ken just said, in Game 1, she broke up her extra base hit streak. She hit a 2-run double in her first at-bat, and then in the next inning, she hit a 2-run homer. So now she's starting an extra base hit streak. And in Game 2, surely enough, she hits another home run in her first at-bat. Right, so now she co-leads the team along with Jordan Nowakowski with 6 home runs. And then that game, the score would be 1-0 until the 6th inning when Melissa Rarick would help herself with an RBI single. So 2-0 late in the game, but Melissa Rarick's defense behind her just let her down. 2 crucial errors, and they allowed 3 unearned runs to score. Melissa Rarick, she went the distance, went all 7 innings, and allowed no earned runs. Yet she still got the loss. And, when you're facing a pitcher as tough as Coppersmith, you cannot be spotting them extra runs because it's hard enough to manufacture one against her. And you got 2, granted, both of them from your own pitcher, but still, they cannot be handing out these extra outs. They can't be having to get 4 or 5 outs per inning. And it seems like every single time Melissa Rarick toes the rubber, her defense lets her down. At least that's been the trend over the past couple of weeks. Now, they split the doubleheader on Friday, and the real important game was Saturday, the rubber game. Game 3, and of course, Courtney Coppersmith was going to get that game. I mean, the coach at UMBC would have had to have been out of her mind to go any other direction. And just like the UMBC coach, Coach Bryant would have been out of her mind to go with anyone other than Dawn Bodrick. And it was a battle of the aces. Of course, Courtney Coppersmith ended up the victorious of the two aces. Dawn Bodrick took the complete game loss. She went the full 7 innings. She allowed 4 runs, though. Only 3 of them earned while striking out 7. But Coppersmith was just dominant. She only allowed 2 hits. Yeah. One of those was a home run to Jordan Herring. Freshman outfielder Juliana Sanzone had the other hit, kind of a meaningless single. So they lost game 3 4-1, and they lost 2 out of 3 in the series. That gave UMBC the division. So
yeah, it is again an incredible run for Stony Brook. But obviously UMBC has become the team to beat. And again, it's that acquisition, Courtney Coppersmith, coming out of nowhere and becoming the conference's most lethal weapon in softball. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable accomplishments this young woman has accomplished. And again, another complete game, going nearly perfect, can only give up the 1 run. Coach Chris Kohlmeyer spoke about after the game that, Coppersmith is arguably the most valuable player in this conference. We talked about Melissa Rowridge, Dawn Bodberg as well, but what Coppersmith does on that mound, again, virtually never giving up more than any runs, or at the very least more than 1 or 2.
Right. So if you're going to score 1 or 2, then you cannot afford to allow any. And guess what? Melissa Rarick really didn't allow any. So,
right.
When she induces those ground balls and those pop-ups, you've got to make those plays. You can't be handing them 3 unearned runs. So it was really unfortunate that Melissa Rarick really put her heart and soul into that game. And they should have won that game. If they had won that game, they would have won the series, and it would have won them the division. Now, because they lose the division, they actually fall all the way down to the number 3 seed. So they will be facing number 2 UAlbany next week.
And we spoke about that. And we spoke about that too. Again, with UMBC, they're the team to beat. But for
right,
Stony
and they got
Brook,
hot at the right time. They got hot at the best possible time to get hot.
Exactly at the end of the season.
Right,
but really for Stony Brook,
right.
To me, they're going to face UAlbany. And for them, that's the first hump in their road that they need to get over before they get to UMBC. Right. This isn't like Women's Lacrosse, Stony Brook. You can't overlook any games here. Not that Women's Lacrosse is doing that, but I'm just saying, just analyzing the situation. UAlbany swept Stony Brook in their 3-game series earlier this month.
Yeah,
exactly. The most Stony Brook scored were 2 runs. They got shut out in game 2. So this is a team where you don't want to fall behind because you're only afforded a couple of losses in the tournament before you're out. So for Stony Brook, again, it's going to take a lot going up against a number 2 team in UAlbany. And I think UMBC, UAlbany, and Stony Brook are all very close 1, 2, and 3. Really, any team can beat any other on any given day. But for Stony Brook, the Bats have really got to wake up. And defensively, you can't afford any mistakes because those unforced errors are going to be the ones that bite you at the end of the day.
Yeah, again, especially when you go up against a pitcher who will not surrender jack, right? Courtney Coppersmith is not going to allow any more than 2 runs, okay? And that's on her bad days, right? Like Courtney Coppersmith allowing 2 runs, that was a terrible outing for her. And I mean, of course, it's tough when you have to pitch to Melissa Rarick, right? So at least maybe they have found Courtney Coppersmith's kryptonite, and it's Melissa Rarick, right? But
that's what it's going to be. Again, this is going back to 2 seasons ago where Coppersmith threw a no-hitter in the semifinals of the American East Conference. Okay, to do it during playoffs is absolutely nuts.
Right.
The reigning pitcher of the year for a reason.
Go ahead.
One very important thing. They don't have to play them, if they're lucky, more than once in this tournament. Double elimination tournament. Now, of course, it's much tougher to win having lost 1 game. And we'll go chapter and verse on how baseball only did that during the 2012 College World Series run. But the whole point is, meet them once, beat them once, and and worry about the rest of the conference and what the teams you're going to face in the tournament. You may have to beat them again in the final. That's the only tricky part.
But you know what, Matt, though? It's not like they can't beat them. I mean, Stony Brook outplayed UMBC in Game 3. That game was won without those errors. So,
True.
And they have the bullets to win. I mean, who has a better 1-2 than Dawn Bodrig and Melissa Rorick? Not many teams. And,
Courtney Coppersmith.
Yeah, I mean, she herself
that's
is
a good point.
and
Seawolves have 2, and UMBC's got 1 in terms of great pitchers.
Yes, exactly. And, if they want to win, if they want to make damage in this postseason, and they do, and they definitely have the talent and the ability. They've been winning all year up until late. So if they really want to make some noise in the playoffs, they've got to start cashing in with runners in scoring position. I mean, they've had their games, obviously. Game 1 of the series, and they scored 11 runs. They were all over the place with runners in scoring position. But a big theme of their season is a lot of missed opportunities. Even when I was covering them on the ground last, I guess it was two weeks ago now on Wednesday when they played UMass Lowell in a rainout makeup doubleheader. And they won both of those games, but I'm pretty sure they left like a combined 15 runners on base between the two games, and like 9 of them were in Game 1.
Here are the scores, and just on that point, and here are the scores Stony Brook has had for the past couple of weeks. Again, that UMass Lowell series, they swept the Riverhawks 2-1, 3-2. The U Albany series, they lost all 3, 6-2, shutout 2-0, 3-1. They beat St. John's 3-2 off a 7th inning clutch single by Brook Dye.
Yes.
UMBC, obviously, the 11-2 game is an outlier against Courtney Coppersmith's 3-2 and 4-1 loss for the Seawolves. For the Seawolves, again, you're absolutely right. They got to start catching it. And again, it's not like they don't have power to do this. You got Melissa Roberts, Dawn Bodrug when she's playing, Jordan Nowakowski, who's leading the team and is among the best hitters in the conference in home run.
Jordan Herring,
who's one of the greatest slap hitters and players to get on base ever. Right. Nicole McCarville as well.
She's as good a table setter as Stony Brook has ever had. And then they've even got talent, down beneath them. Lindsay Osmer is good. She can hit. Nicole McCarville is good. She can hit. Even freshman Juliana Sanzone, she's red hot. She's hitting over 300 this year. She can hit, and she's got some pop. They've got the bullets to do this, to drive in these runs when they're out there, but they've got to stop leaving them on base, because these are low scoring games, and they're games that they should be winning. They are not the third best team in the conference. In my opinion, they are the best team in this conference, yet they are the 3 seed. And the majority of that is because they haven't been driving in those key runs. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes isn't good enough. Okay, and if you're not going to drive in the key run every time, you got to make the plays in the field. You can't be allowing 3 unearned runs. You can't be spotting Courtney Coppersmith 3 late runs. Can't be doing that. Cannot be doing that at all. Okay.
I'll say another thing too that kind of hurts Stony Brook in that essence. So that improves your point again. For Stony Brook again, one of the top 3 teams in the conference, especially on offense. 1 and 2, U Albany hitting just under 300, and UMBC right behind them at 288. Stony Brook's hitting under 270.
Yeah,
and all
260 going into that St. John's game. So
every one of the offensive stats are led by UMBC or U Albany. So again, this is an offense where they need to play perfect softball because pitching wise, they have the lowest ERA. The only team in the conference with an ERA under 2. Even UMBC with Courtney Coppersmith having a .4 ERA has a combined team ERA of 2.41. Okay, and Stony Brook has played 6 more games than the Retrievers. Yeah. And 12 of those are shutouts. So they're matching Coppersmith on the shutout ability.
Yeah.
So again, we know the pitching is there, we know the talent is there, but again, when it comes time for the Stony Brook team, you're absolutely right. The bats got to wake up or they're going to get sent home early. And they're going to have their first challenge against U Albany on Thursday.
Right. Most importantly, the bats, but definitely the gloves too. Now let's give some shout outs here. So Melissa Rarick, she went 4 for 8 this weekend with a double, 2 homers, 6 RBIs, and 3 runs scored. And with her homer, with one of her 2 homers, the first one on Friday, she became the program's all-time leader in RBIs. That is a phenomenal accomplishment. That's really once in a lifetime when you think about it. So hats off to Melissa Rarick. Congratulations. And of course, she also pitched a complete game with no earned runs or walks allowed. Senior Jordan Herring, who is the program's all-time leader in singles, she went 4 for 9 with a home run this weekend and scored 3 runs herself. Third baseman Riley Craig went 4 for 9, including 3 for 3 in Game 1. And freshman Juliana Sanzone went 3 for 9 with 2 runs driven in this past weekend. So couple of good, pretty solid performances, and they're definitely gonna have to take it to the next level if they're not there already.
A lot of championship aspirations on the women's side of sports. Again, for our upcoming broadcast, May 13th, we'll be broadcasting the first round of the America East playoffs between Stony Brook and New Albany. That one's starting at 3:15 here on WUSB, and then on Friday, women's lacrosse, Stony Brook hosting Towson, our broadcast starting at 11:45. And of course, should they advance, we'll do our best to get the finals happening on Saturday for softball and round 2 on Sunday, which is currently scheduled to start at 1 p.m. But of course, now on the men's side of things, Matt, I know you're so eager and anticipating this chat about baseball and the weekend they have had.
Aren't we all?
Oh, boy. Okay, so Saturday, I was actually going to do a postmortem on men's lacrosse, but we'll go with baseball. First of all, let's wind back a little further. And the last series, when the Seawolves took on NJIT, that was actually supposed to be a road series.
Yes.
But Seawolves were the road team at their own field. Because NJIT couldn't play at home. Yeah, their
home field was unavailable for the Saturday half of that doubleheader. So right. Stony Brook had 2 extra home games as the road team, and they could not capitalize either. Go on that.
Okay, yes. They dropped 2 games, 6-5 and 3-2, one-run games, and then split the next day. The opener 5-2, and lost the nightcap 9-8. Okay. And the nightcap was won on a walk-off. So, go through a weekend against Binghamton, where they split. And now you got NJIT again. And here you go. Opener, both pitchers go all the way. And that meant that Tyler Stafflinger and Jared Milch both pitched 7 innings. Unfortunately, Milch makes one mistake. David Marcano hits a 2-run homer, and that's the difference in the game. That happened in the 6th inning, 2-0 the final.
Yeah, but Milch was outstanding. But go on.
Milch was out. Yeah, he was outstanding. We're getting somewhere here. Okay, game 2, all Stony Brook, 11-3. And then today was a lot of fun because here we go. Cole Durkin, the right fielder, wins game 1 on a walk-off squeeze bunt. Now, it was reminiscent because he was supposedly hit with a pitch and then got recalled. And then that was Paulson, correction on that. That was a batter before. So I go and mention the last time in my mind that happened. Well, actually, it happened earlier this year, but every time that happens, when a guy alleges that he was hit by a pitch and gets called back, I go back to a certain day in 2012 when Max Tissenbaum, same thing happened to him in Game 2 of the Super Regional against LSU. So, and he came up with a big RBI double and made the Sports Center top 10 that day. So, guess who shows up after the game? Max Sissenbaum. So we talked for a little bit between games, and it was great. We reminisced about 2012 and talked about today's guys, what he's up to lately. And it was a lot of fun because we got a chance to talk about what the guys today have in common with the guys then. And the most important thing, Paulson, by the way, got recalled and came up with a big sacrifice bunt that set up the walk-off, set up the squeeze play, put a runner on third. Okay, put Fox on third, and he was able to come in. And I had the squeeze play picked on the air. I said, they're going to do a squeeze play. Question is when. Now, the funny thing is, Durkin didn't square up to bunt on the first two pitches. Then he lays one down.
Saved it.
Yeah. So he even had me fooled for a second. Wait, is he swinging away? Nah. This is a perfect opportunity for a squeeze play. Only one out. Come on. So anyway, Seawolves pulled that first game out. Now, in the second game, things got a little hairy for the Stony Brook Seawolves. They end up losing it 7-5. But there's no love lost between these two teams.
Oh, God.
And you heard it in the crowd noise. Because the crowd noise was mostly the dugouts. And it was chirping. And it wasn't birds chirping. It was the other kind of chirping. And Ken was working camera for the second game. And he heard it a little bit more clearly than what came up on the mics. And, of course, we have no control about what the crowd says. So somebody curses, we can't bleep it out. But it was starting to get a little chirpy. And it got a little chirpier afterward between the two teams. So now you got no love lost. You have a rivalry in the making between NJIT and Stony Brook. And you go to AmericaEast.com, you look at the standings, and we were pretty sure that the Seawolves could have possibly clinched home field advantage in the postseason for the America East. As it turns out, they have to work a little bit harder for it. They are 20-8 in the conference, and the nearest team behind them is 6 games behind, Albany. They're 16-14. Well, actually, that's in the loss column. Okay, because they're only 4 behind the win column, so that's 5 games up. Magic number, according to our calculations, is 2, which would mean Seawolf win, Albany loss, 2 Seawolf wins, some combination thereof, which will clinch home field advantage at Joe Nathan, which would be the first time they hosted an America East tournament in Joe Nathan Field since 2012.
2012.
Right.
And again, 2012.
Because he went to neutral sites afterward.
Right. And again, I feel like it's the perfect analogy for what we're seeing now, especially with NGIT. Because quite frankly, this game, today in particular over yesterday, that felt like playoff atmosphere. I mean, from the moment we arrived, from just the audience to the cadence being thrown back and forth between both teams. And again,
the dogs are barking on cue.
That's right.
Some NJIT fans brought their dogs with them, and the dogs are cheering them on.
Yeah, that's insane. But again, these games, these games were 2 tightly contested games. Okay, it wasn't like yesterday where it was a pitcher's duel and then a Stony Brook blowout. Both of these games were a seesaw, and both of these dugouts were stirring something, and both of these teams were really getting under the skin of one another. And I mean, that compared with, I think they were just angry with everyone. The umpires were, they were getting challenged.
For sure.
I mean, really,
there was a lot of just back and forth, just negative energy. I mean, the parents of the Stony Brook players and the parents of the NJIT players would not stop yelling and arguing with the umpires.
It was like Little League.
Every single strike call was against our team, every single ball call was against our team. I'm speaking just from a random perspective. I don't mean ours. I just mean whoever it was.
I'm trying to block all that out because I'm concentrating on the game in front of me, and I'm talking over it too.
Right, and
so
even in the game in front of you, how many times did Matt Sank leave the dugout today? The most impressive stat that they won't show you because it's not in the stat sheet, Matt Sank in Game 2 got 2 warnings, no ejection. Come on, that's awesome. That's College World Series level type stuff right there.
Yeah, you wouldn't believe how that crazy it was, especially since I saw the early Mets game today.
Yeah.
The Diamondbacks had a player and their coach ejected.
That's right. Escobar and the Diamondbacks head coach was ejected, and they received less warnings than Matt Sank did. They had 0. They were immediately tossed for arguing balls and strikes.
I didn't even know that there was a warning. Matt Sank got a warning for disputing 1 call, and then got so the first call he disputed was a drop on transfer call. Now I was sitting at a vantage point where I could not tell if there was a transfer attempt or what have you. Okay, so maybe Sank had a valid argument, but the first base umpire warned him for whatever the warning was labeled as. And then, of course, the ball strike calls. I mean, I was sitting right behind home plate today. I was reporting for the Statesman. I was pinch hitting for our usual baseball beat reporter who was sick today. And I had a great just a view of home plate and the umpire, and I heard Matt Sank say something. Don't know what it was, but I heard him say something.
I don't think you repeated.
And the umpire looks over, goes, I don't know who you're talking to, then walks towards the dugout, takes his mask off, goes, but I hope you're not talking to me. That's a warning. That's a balls and strikes warning.
You're talking to me? You're talking to me?
It was a day loaded with confrontation today. And, while Sank was arguing the drop on transfer call, NJIT's, I don't know if it was their head coach or if it was one of their base coaches or if it was just a player, but someone from the dugout was yelling at him, telling him to shut up. And I mean, I don't know who it was. And, I this was really funny on Coach Sank's part. He's such a good guy, such a good sense of humor. When the home plate umpire gave him his second warning, Sank responds, "Where's your warning?"
That's right. So, and he didn't get ejected for that either. But
no, that was because that a 31-year veteran, the only America East coach to ever appear in a College World Series. That guy intimidates the umpires. They do not want to be the guy who threw Matt Sank out.
I will say this: I felt like there were some justification to being upset at the umpires. I don't think they played a perfect game. There was a lot of wackiness going on.
There was a lot of inconsistency. I was calling. Wait, strike.
Yeah. Consistency is
bottom part of the zone was unclear. Again, both teams I feel like had valid arguments for respective plays. For NGIT, of course, fans would be livid at Brett Paulson, where he lays down the butt and he tips it into the catcher's glove. But Paulson says he's hit. All the while, Fox jolts to second and no one stops him. And they leave Fox, and the umpires rule Fox is allowed to stay there. Ultimately, he scores to win in Game 1. And Game 2, obviously, with that.
I still haven't figured out what the hell was going on there.
I did. So
well, that's what it was.
First of all, I got to speak to Coach Sank after the game. I knew the rule to begin with, but I got to speak to Coach Sank after the game. So, you see, a foul ball is an automatic dead ball. So is a hit by pitch. However, a foul tip held by the catcher is simply just a strike. So it's the same thing as a swing and miss or as a looking strike. So Evan Fox running on that play was perfectly fine. He was allowed to throw him out. So because Evan Fox ran and the foul tip was held, it was the same thing as a swing and a miss. So Evan Fox was rewarded with
defensive
indifference. Yeah.
But the funny thing was, Fox was going to first.
Yes, he was going back. Yes.
He thought he'd been hit.
Right.
Yeah. Paulson was going first. Paulson was about 80 feet to 80 feet from home plate before the umpires called him back.
Yeah.
So, of course, there is insane. Again, it was a very hectic day. Not even talking about some of the key players. I mean, I think something big to point out, too, to kind of added fuel to the fire was that game-changing home run in Game 2 by Paul Franzoni, the catcher. Only one hit in Game 2, but that was a 2-run bomb off Kyle Johnson, who up until that point was untouchable. I mean, he shut down the NGIT offense in Game 1 and was awarded with the victory. And Coach Stank brought him out for Game 2. He's getting a bit tired in his 4th inning of work on the day. Ultimately, it bit the Seawolves in the behind as he gave up 3 runs, including the big one. And Franzoni, he didn't taunt, but he certainly flexed around the bases, and that definitely ruffled a few feathers of the Seawolves players. Yeah, that's something they didn't forget. And
no, it's
quite frankly, it's something I'm hoping that
we see more of.
Exactly. Not that I'm rooting for any teams, but I will not be ashamed of an NGIT Stony Brook Division B final. Because, of course, now both teams in divisions, the playoff system is the top 2 teams from each division will play in the semifinals, and the finals are the winners of the top 2 seeds. Stony Brook, again, only need a couple wins to secure the first berth.
Yeah. And, oh, man, and now I forgot. God, that's the worst when you forget what you were about to say.
Yeah, again.
Okay.
I just want to say, again, it was a very hectic day. Certainly, we're not going to forget it. I mean, again, the tensions there, I would say, Matt, Zach, you guys, being there longer than us, I don't know if there was an individual day where you've seen that much tension surrounding a game at Joe Nathan Field. I mean, there were times on the field, I believe Giordano was upset that he was called out on an infield hit that he thought was a hit but was ruled an out, that he came charging out of the dugout and had to be pulled back by Matt Sank. Yeah. Maybe I got the wrong guy, but that was something that happened. And I mean, the tension. Today, there's a lot of bad blood between the Highlanders and Seawolves. And
that was Evan Fox. That was
Evan Fox. There you go.
Yes. But you know why that mattered? Because the next batter, Cole Durkin, launched a 3-run bomb. So that would have been a grand slam had they got. And that was the wrong call. I mean, we saw that live. It certainly looked like Evan Fox beat that ball. But whatever. Anyway, so I remember what I was going to say now. Game 2, well, it was actually Game 4, but the nightcap
Game
of the
2
doubleheader
today.
Yes. That was what we saw today. Sunday's doubleheader today is exactly what we saw the last Sunday doubleheader they played against NJIT. If you remember, when they lost 3 of 4 to them in New Jersey, Kyle Johnson came on for the save in the first game of that doubleheader, and he got the save. And then in Game 2 of that doubleheader, Matt Sank brought him back out, and he instantly allowed back-to-back home runs to surrender the lead, and they would go on to lose that game. Okay, now today, Kyle Johnson comes in relief in Game 1, gets 4 outs, gets the earned win, and then Sank brings him back out in Game 2. That is really a questionable. I mean, he's a great coach. Okay, so
here's the thing. We mentioned it on the air.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. That he doesn't trust anyone other than Kyle Johnson.
Well,
so
who's earned the trust?
But it's a questionable, and it has bitten him both times against the same teams.
Truthfully, Stony Brook, they're not really in a position, unless they lose out, they're really not in a position to where they should fear, their playoff spot. But in the playoffs, especially if you're going to face NGIT, who is the only team that's won a series against the Seawolves in conference play. Reminder, they started 15-1 to start conference play.
Right.
And so for them, if you only have 5 pitchers, realistically, 4 starters and Kyle Johnson, who at this point is working more as a long reliever.
Yeah.
How far is this team going to go if you don't have the offense to back it up? Because you're not going to have an 11-3 win every game like you are Game 2 yesterday. You're going to have those 4-3 tug of wars or those 5-7 collapses. This is the time. Next 2 weeks are crucial for the rest of the Stony Brook bullpen to really step up and control and really master, the work of the bullpen and really back up what the starters have produced.
Yeah.
Number wise, Stony Brook has the best starting rotation in the conference.
Yeah.
But the bullpen hasn't been able to back it up.
No, I mean, and the thing is it's just one guy after another who's not named Kyle Johnson that comes in and surrenders a couple runs, not just one. And
Kyle Johnson today, he was the one who gave up the big hit
Yes,
that
but you could understand why.
Oh, right.
You know, I mean, and he had been warming up at that point. He was brought in the 7th inning and already worked the 7th inning. He allowed that home run in the 8th. He had been warming up. He got up to warm up in the 4th inning when Sam Turcotte ran into some trouble. So Kyle Johnson got up to warm up 3 times today. You know, he was probably tired. He only threw however many pitches he threw today, but he probably threw somewhere around 80 in total when you think about, you know, the warm-up pitches he had to throw and stuff like that. So it is always that's a real dice roll that Matt Sank has tried twice now against the same team, and it's came back to bite him both times. But you know, I spoke to Coach about that. I asked him, with the playoffs coming up soon, you know, obviously you're gonna fall to a 3-man rotation, so someone moves to the bullpen.
Probably DeGennaro.
I was wondering who that might be. He doesn't even have an answer for it yet. He still wants to figure out who else is in his bullpen. You know?
Well,
I mean,
here's the thing. Just take a look at the pitching stats. Who leads the team in appearances? Johnson. But guess what else? 2 starters have 1 fewer appearance than he does.
Yeah.
He's got 12 appearances. DeGennaro's got 11 on 9 starts. Herman's got 11 on 10 starts. Yeah. And Turcotte's got 11 on 10 starts. So it's all the starters. So you have one reliever that has more appearances than the starters do. The starters have been consistent, solid. But a perfect example is he brings out Ben Farrow, right?
Right. Who's struggling.
Walks a batter and hits him. Hook.
Right. Quick hook. And, you know, Devin Sharkey hadn't pitched since, I think it was April 18th. And I like Devin Sharkey. You know, he's got some good stuff. He throws pretty hard for a young lefty like himself. And he walked 3 hitters today. But at the same time, he threw the ball relatively well. He should have been out of that 8th inning 1 batter sooner, but there was a miscommunication in right field. Cole Durkin did not take charge on that pop-up, and it fell in for an RBI single. But Sharkey gave them 5 outs without surrendering an earned run of his own. So he technically... And I think he's only got like 9 innings on the year. I don't know. That's off the top of my head, but he's barely pitched.
He's got. I'm looking him up right now.
11 and 1/3.
Yeah. 11 and a third.
9 coming in. 9 coming in.
How many appearances?
He's got 7. Well, here's another great thing.
And that
I introduced him.
But he's like the second best pitcher in that bullpen. Yeah. Really. You know, that's
I introduced him as a left-hander who wears number 16.
Yeah.
But it's not Whitey Ford.
Right, yeah. Well, he might have done that on purpose. I don't know. I'd have to ask.
Yeah, he's got, I mean, if you're left-handed, you wear 16 for Whitey Ford. You wear 32 for Steve Carlton, Sandy Koufax. Okay.
Koufax, right?
And John Matlack. Don't forget John Matlack.
John Matlack, too. That's right.
Yeah.
I wonder if he picked that number for Koufax.
Yeah.
So,
John Lannon. Yeah. We could do this one all day.
John Lannon.
Yeah. Do you remember
from Nationals?
Not the Beatle, not John Lennon.
No, Lannon. Lannon went to Chaminade. I know Lannon well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, Lannon. This you'll get a kick out of this. When he was first called up, pitched against the Mets. So Mike Vaccaro, who was only 2 years behind me at Chaminade, so we knew each other then. He and I were in the media scrum interviewing him, and we put our heads up as we both went. But that also happened when Al Groh got hired as coach of the Jets because he was a Chaminade grad, and his former coach at Chaminade was there at the press conference too, along with Vaccaro and me. So. Anyway, that's another story. Yeah. The important thing here is that when this is the Achilles heel of this Stony Brook Seagulls team. So while it was great
ever since
reminiscing, it was great reminiscing with Max Tissenbaum. That team had everything, including 7 guys drafted by major league teams.
Right, and they were good
1 guy in the majors.
Yes, yeah. And then eventually,
so,
Tropiano at that point.
And Tropiano would have been, but he had drafted the year before.
Yeah. I was just that was a mental flop. Go on, Matt.
Yeah, the 2011 team was the 2012 team plus Nick Tropiano. But we talked about that, too, because Tissenbaum was on that team, and Tropiano won his game. And, again, the tournament was held at Joe Nathan Field, but everybody else forgot to hit. Now, it's kind of a parallel with what the softball team had been going through for a little bit.
Yeah.
Waiting for the hits to come that didn't come.
Yeah,
and this team was top to bottom a juggernaut. Mm-hmm. Okay, remember, they won 50 games a year after. This team was awesome. Mm-hmm. And it had beaten NC State in the NCAAs the year before, ran out of pitching and got destroyed by Coastal Carolina down in Myrtle Beach. But this team was on its way to glory, and they thought it was going to happen in 2011, but they fell short. But that inspired them to go as far as they did in 2012. That's the big problem I have. There are two problems I have, actually. I'm saying, amongst our chief weapons are, Monty Python reference, too old for you guys. But anyway.
Never heard of him.
And again, the big reason why we speak about that, especially so in depth, is because of our next topic in men's lacrosse. Because that was a team that was virtually untouchable, the best winning streak in the conference. And then the losses started to pile on. The Achilles heel was dealt, and ultimately, this team was one and done once again, Matt.
Yeah, but perfect segue, because you got two Achilles heels on this team, the baseball team. One very good bullpen pitcher, and that's it. And two, you're 7, 8, and 9, iffy in the lineup. Bottom of the lineup, iffy. Now, we turn to men's lacrosse with only 3 minutes before the top of the hour. I will be short, and I will be succinct, because what I will say is that I had an email conversation with a former broadcast partner of mine, Frank Barilli, who, of course, is a Stony Brook lacrosse alum from the very first year in the America East Conference back in 2002. And I said that was one of the worst postseason performances I've seen in years. And Chris McNeil Jr., who had a good game otherwise, got called for a 2-minute unreleasable. Now, a Vermont player had also been called for a 2-minute unreleasable, but they killed the penalty earlier, an illegal body check. And I didn't see it because I was in the studio reading scores on a break, so because we had the women's game on at the same time. So what happened here is that Vermont scores 3 goals, turns the game around completely.
68 seconds.
They go 6 unanswered. Stony Brook gets 1 garbage time on a man up, 10-7 your final. But at that point, Stony Brook was leading 6-3.
Yeah.
Palinetti looking good, everybody looking good. But here's what bothered me the most. Vangenhoven and Palinetti took a bunch of shots. But I swear, I don't remember one in the second half being any closer than 10 yards out. They were not charging the net at all. Now, part of that is Vermont's defense, and part of that's on them.
Yeah.
And
again,
they were taken out of their game in 3 straight games.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. That style where, again, the lead attackers were held outside for about 20, 25 yards from the net is something reminiscent of when they faced UMBC both times and Vermont in their last preseason game. Remember, Stony Brook went off on a 5-2 run to start out the game. There were 0 goals scored in the second quarter, which is crazy. And really, again, all it took was that man up, those 3 goals in a minute 10 seconds to change the dynamic of the game. Both teams were virtually equal on the stat sheet. You know, they both shot around the same, having over 20 shots, a lot of turnovers. You know, Vermont actually had more turnovers than Stony Brook. And face-offs, Vermont won 14 of 20. But, I mean, again, those 3 extra man opportunities are the only thing that stand out on the stat sheet that say this is how Vermont won. And, again, limiting and suppressing those Stony Brook scorers, holding Vangenhoven and Palinetti and McNeil scoreless through a much of the game list, 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 through a much.
And if they had turned one of those overtime games against UMBC, would have been top 10, according to my friend there. And he's right. Absolutely right. So you go from that lofty height, scoring 22 goals on Binghamton with Palinetti only having to score 1. And then 3 straight games, all close, all slower paced, shot selection goes in the tank. And the Seawolves were simply, I'll say it over and over again, weren't playing their game and couldn't impose their game on their opponent. Vermont and UMBC outplayed them by taking them out of their game.
On top of that, this team has an identity problem when it comes to the playoffs. And this goes beyond Coach Ghilardi's tenure. You've seen it under Coach Nagel as well. I mean, go back to 2015. This team has not made it out of the first round. They lost 3 games to Vermont. They lost 1 to UAlbany. Of course, last time they lost while they were hosting the tournament to UMBC. And last year, they didn't have COVID. They didn't play because of COVID. So, again, you look at this team, when they do play, and I mean, they're an offensive juggernaut during the regular season, but they are constantly, time and time again, held in check. And it's just insane that it doesn't change. Like, you think they learn from those mistakes, are able to adapt and combat those problems. But again, the second half just showed that they fell right into the same mistakes that cost them those games against UMBC, against Vermont, heck, even against Hofstra. It was a 2017 scoring fest, but still, this is a team where that identity just eluded them, and ultimately that's what cost them the conference.
Well, speaking of being eliminated from the playoffs, there's a specific professional New York hockey team that was eliminated from the playoffs about 6 days ago now. Anybody want to talk about that? We are
Joe.
Beginning of the second hour.
Joe Sakoa on cue right there. Joe, thank you for joining us, and I'm sure that this may not be pretty to talk about to begin your segment here on Sports Section.
Yeah, the floor is yours, Joe.
Yeah, it's. Listen, I'm not as upset as many people might think over the fact that the Rangers didn't make the playoffs, because, to be honest with you, the expectation probably wasn't for them to make the playoffs, considering that it was a very tough division going into this. Going into this season, we knew that the East was probably going to be a gauntlet, and in a shortened season, 56 games, and you think about the Rangers and the slow start that they got off to, and their top players not performing, and then losing Panarin for 2 weeks. Everybody sits there and says, if maybe you don't lose Panarin for 2 weeks for that leave of absence, and Mika Zibanejad gets up and going, and he doesn't have 2 goals in the first 27 games, maybe it'd be a different story. But believe me, I'm not as upset about it as many people think. I think what's really more shocking and upsetting is the fact that the immediate and surprising firings of both John Davidson and Jeff Gorton, especially with the foundation that they built within this team, and especially JD specifically, just 2 years on the job, a beloved Ranger. First thing I thought about was, his introductory press conference, where his first couple of words was, "Dreams really do come true." And he was, on the verge of tears. And then, I watched the broadcast the night of when it happened, because they did play a game that very night up in Boston. And, Sam Rosen, the longtime broadcaster for the Rangers, is holding back tears on the broadcast because that's a very good friend of his. So definitely shocking and surprising. And then, of course, you try to figure out and try to put the pieces together of why this happened, where James Dolan decided to go full-blown Knicks on the Rangers situation, where he put his nose into this business that he really rarely does. And you think back to the days of Glenn Sather. Basically, Glenn Sather called the shots. Obviously, you check in with your owner and stuff, but, he kind of left Glenn Sather alone in those situations. So, look, to sum that all up, I think a couple of days have passed to let it process for Ranger fans. Obviously, it's upsetting, but, they're not getting somebody who's worse in Chris Drury, because obviously Chris Drury has been highly sought after by a number of teams that he politely declined and he's really risen through the ranks of the Rangers organization in the 6 years that he's been in a front office role. And I'm very eager and curious to see what he needs to do. So, in essence, the way I pin it and look at it is that, I think really what the truth behind this is, and again, this is just me formulating my own opinion and just kind of reading between the lines of the reports that we've heard, that I firmly believe that James Dolan wanted to make a general manager change. And I can understand that because, it's been 4 years since the letter. They've stockpiled a decent amount of talent. They have a lot of assets. They have draft picks. That maybe it's time to now take that next step to where I think that James Dolan wanted to replace the GM. And I think John Davidson said, well, if you're going to think to replace him that I don't agree with, then you're going to have to let me go. And I think that's what wound up happening. And then you tie in the fact that the Knicks' success this season probably had him thinking, listen, if the Knicks can turn it around that quickly, I've been patient for 4 years with the New York Rangers. It's time to now take the next step. And one of the quotes he gave the New York Post was, I feel like we're missing something, and Chris Drury, I think, will be the guy to find it. So definitely an emotional, draining week for the Rangers, but good for them that they ended the season on a winning note.
There was a lot of nonsense to deal with. I think another thing to touch on, too, is Tom Wilson. I mean, the heinous action starting off the week, throwing Artemi Panarin to the ground, and as a result, he's only fined $5,000. This is a repeat offender, mind you, in so many unsportsmanlike conducts and flagrant penalties, and the league doesn't think to give him another suspension because playoffs are coming. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I obviously was very vocal and adamant about the fact that Tom Wilson should have been suspended, and the Rangers put out a very courageous and bold statement. And of course, that's where everybody thought that, Davidson and Gorton didn't agree with the statement, but that wasn't related to the decisions of the firings and stuff like that. Listen, I think they hit it on the head because they're basically saying that the player safety department, who we all know has been really inconsistent with a lot of things, and the fact that they, slapped Wilson with a $5,000 fine. And granted, it wasn't even the play of, it wasn't the situation of where he grabbed Panarin's hair and threw him around like a rag doll. It was for the fact that he sucker punched Pavel Buchnevich while he was on the ground. So,
well, there's multiple things. That's how bad it is.
It's alarming. And then when you have the player safety department then going out and suspending guys for far less action, it makes you scratch your head. So I think the Rangers were courageous. I think that they hit it on the head with that statement. And I think that, George Parros maybe needs to be reevaluated as the head of player safety department, because it's an absolute joke that, Tom Wilson, we know, is a repeat offender. And the fact that he's slapped on the wrist with a fine is just ridiculous. And to be honest with you, then he leaves that game. Then the Rangers responded, which, listen, we know that they're not a tough team, and I think that's going to be something that will definitely be addressed by Chris Drury in this offseason. They start the game, a line brawl, reminiscent of the Rangers-Devils line brawl when Rupp, Stu Bickel, and Pruss went at it at the Garden. So they did that. So I think the Rangers players took matters into their own hands, and I think as a Rangers fan, you had to be really proud of that situation because there were 6 fights and 100 penalty minutes in the first period. So, and then you wonder though, then Tom Wilson leaves the game with an upper body injury. That's basically, him hiding like a coward. And then not for nothing, he gets hit with a knee on knee the very next game. And good, you know what? Karma comes back to haunt you, and that's exactly what he deserved then. Listen, I'm not wishing any players to get hurt, but you know what? The knee on knee, and I'm hoping he's out for the playoffs because he deserved it.
Honestly, my thing going back to the Rangers in particular is this. So you get rid of Jeff Gordon, get rid of John Davidson. What do you do with David Quinn? Because, Joe, I understand you weren't a guy who really believed they could make playoffs. I did. And frankly, you look at the numbers, it'll give 2 stats. First off, the top 12 teams that scored the most goals in the conference, 11 of those teams made it in. The Rangers are the only one on the outside looking in. They scored more than the Bruins, who made it in, and the Isles. They're 5-15 in 1-goal games. So you switch 3 or 4 of those results, and it's the Rangers in 4th or 3rd. I mean, with the new of Drury coming in, what's David Quinn's future? Because there's a lot of speculation, especially on the fan base, that Quinn is a sitting duck for the moment, and the other shoe's going to drop.
I think you're probably going to get that answer after tomorrow. Tomorrow is when breakup day is happening and all the exit interviews are happening. So I think Drury is going to assess that situation. I know Drury was pretty high on David Quinn as well when that hiring process happened. So, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do there. I think this week will be a telling sign, but also you look at Chris Drury and you're like, well, Quinn did a good job, not the greatest. And if this team is ready to take the next step, maybe a little bit more experience has to be out there. And there are quite a number of names that are out there that could intrigue the New York Rangers. Now, I know people are starting to connect some dots because today 2 coaches were let go or mutually parted ways. Rick Tocchet of the Arizona Coyotes and John Tortorella of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And it's so funny because, I look on social media and you see people saying that they want no part of Tortorella because they know that his handling of young kids really hasn't been the best in past seasons.
You just look at Columbus this season.
Yeah, but it's definitely going to be interesting. You also have a guy, Gerard Gallant, who I think would probably be the better fit out of the 3 so far. And then I also know that Mike Babcock is out there, but I honestly think the dark cloud that follows him might not be the right move. So look, I think Chris Drury is in an interesting position.
Mike Babcock, the only dark cloud that follows him is the coach of the Leafs.
Well,
he was fine in Detroit,
but also the other allegations of the way he treated players and stuff like that. I know that there's been a lot of former players very vocal about how he handled certain situations and things of that nature. So,
why is that stuff always happening in Toronto?
Look, the way I think about it is if this is what's going to happen, obviously you saw a management upheaval this week. I think also you look into the fact that, maybe Drury might want to bring in his own guy and start a training camp and a fresh season, with somebody new. Now, Quinn still does have 2 years on a contract. However, it's not, an expensive contract. So I think the Rangers could afford to do that because then, you're saying, all right, we're going to stay with you here, but you have a month or 2 months, whatever the case may be. And then you're changing coaches midway through the year. I think what Drury wants to do is kind of just really take a collective, and he said it in his press conference, he wants to take a collective deep dive into the organization, what they need, what they want to do. So like I said, I really think I want to put my best guess that by Wednesday, we should have an outcome or a fate of David Quinn, because I really think that the Rangers, if they're going to do this, they're going to probably want to act quickly because, things are picking up. The playoffs are starting, but you already only have like 2 months to prepare for an expansion draft, the regular entry draft, and trades and free agency. And the Rangers are going to have some cap space to work with.
Because everything is running late in this NHL season. The regular season is only ending now, a month later than it normally does. So if they want to, and the intention is to do so, start everything normal next year, which means opening in October, training camp in September, this is going to be a very short off season.
Yeah, so it's absolutely going to be a very short off season. So, Drury has a lot of work to do in a very small window, but the fact that where the state of the Rangers are as far as talent and assets, I think he's in a great position to make some possible trades. He's in a good position with cap space. You have a couple of contracts coming off the books. You also have some restricted free agents that you're going to have to take care of and all that stuff. So it's really going to be interesting. But I really think what he's going to want to do is address the toughness of this team because we obviously saw it. And, like I said, James Dolan, I think his patience has worn out, and I think he wants to kind of accelerate what the Rangers got going. And look, we can sit here and play the what-if games because we know that they are finishing the season on a winning note, and they made an interesting run. Don't forget, it was only a 56-game season. What could we have saw with an 82-game season? But I also think, and to wrap my portion up, because I do have to get out of here, but the difference is, and I felt that there were games where the Rangers were not prepared to play, and that falls on the coach. The mental preparation falls on the coach in games like that. When you go back to, and James Dolan cited it in the interview with the Post. He was livid after the Islanders basically manhandled the Rangers for 2 games, shut them out, and
again, it's not that the Isles are a bad team, as we're going to touch on shortly. But again, this is Game 6 and 7 of the season. You're facing them. You got to know what they're bringing.
The Rangers proved that they could play with the Islanders. Everybody's high and mighty on this Islander team. Yeah, they won against the Devils the other day, but they've been struggling. And I got news for you. I do hope that they get knocked out of the first round just to shut Islander fans up, because they had their glory there for a minute because they manhandled the Rangers, and they're so excited to be going to their 3rd straight postseason. All right, get to about 12 straight postseasons like the Rangers did for a 12 out of 13. Then you can come and talk to me. Okay, so honestly, the Islanders are not playing good hockey right now. They are not playing good hockey.
True.
But like I said, though, they came out in those games against the Rangers wanting it more. And that's the difference, I feel, as if in a coach, especially at this level, that you need, and that was a critical game for the Rangers because they could have pulled within 2 points of Boston, if not tie them, and even put some heat on the Islanders, and they didn't do it. And that comes down to preparedness, and that's what I think the difference maker is in with an experienced coach versus a coach coming out of college.
Now, the Islanders have 1 game left in the regular season against Boston.
But I'm going to leave you guys. at that because I do got to get back to work.
Okay.
But
Thank you,
I definitely wanted to address that whole thing. So I'll talk to you guys next week.
And it was very necessary.
Joe Sakoa, and had some very interesting things to say,
Yes, he
and
did.
has had some time to, I think, cool off a little bit, because his initial reaction to that move was the same as most Ranger fans. What?
Mine
It
too.
came as a complete surprise. That you look back and you say, okay, I can see what Dolan might be thinking, but that was not the initial reaction of Ranger fans. The Ranger fans were saying Dolan's screwing it up again. Sticking his hands in where they don't belong. Rangers are on the right track. And look, we've been saying this past few weeks. They don't make the playoffs this year. They're in good position for next year. But, on the other hand, those recent run-ins with the Capitals did expose something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily blame John Davidson for that. He should still be there. But that is something they need to address in the offseason no matter what they do, no matter who is in charge. Now, the Islanders made a good point. Not playing good hockey. Okay, they're in 4th place in the Mass Mutual Eastern Division, but they're only a point behind Boston. They played Boston last game of the regular season, so they do have an opportunity to lock down the 3 if they win.
Tomorrow decides it.
Yep, tomorrow decides it. And also decides who they play. Pick your poison, Washington or Pittsburgh.
Right. But those 2 teams in particular, it's tough. And we're going to bring Zach in for a second, too. Pittsburgh and Washington won those series against the Isles 6-2. And although the Isles have more recent playoff success, this season, Pittsburgh and Washington look like the better team. Obviously, unlike last season, you don't got a 2-month break in between the last time you play where everything resets. This is going to be the 9th, 10th, 11th time these teams battle each other this season. So they know every strength and every weakness you can think of. You're not going to see any surprises come out of those playoff games. I mean, just bringing it to Zach too. The Isles bring a lot to the table, but there's also places they really got to improve on.
Great defense, great goaltending.
Right, great coaching as well.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of Islanders fans are very impressed with the rookies on the team this year, and Oliver Wahlstrom and Elias Sorokin. Sorokin pretty much looking like one of the best Islanders rookie goaltenders ever. I mean, he had posted a 9-1 home record at the Coliseum. That's just the 2nd best by a rookie goaltender in Islanders history. I know there was somebody else, and I got a feeling that this would be something that Matt would probably know, who was probably the other greatest rookie goaltender for the Islanders.
Well, you'll go back to Billy Smith.
I guess that's
Don't-
probably
Yeah.
an example right there. But again, Oliver Wahlstrom is was really also big this season too, and a lot of people really like him after he came in as a prospect for the Islanders and finally getting the time he wanted. People really like to see him and Matt Barzal size up with each other. You also get a lot of big names too, like the guys that the Islanders got from New Jersey and Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac.
Those were nice ads. Don't get me wrong.
Sure
the only problem is that the defense and the goaltending better be good. And in the playoffs, they do play a much more significant role. But then you take a look at Pittsburgh and Washington, and both these teams have scored, in Pittsburgh's case, they've scored 42 more goals this season than the Islanders have. The Capitals have scored slightly fewer, but still a lot more than the Islanders. And that, folks, like I said, less of a factor in the playoffs because most of the goals in the playoffs are garbage goals. But I'm still not convinced that the Islanders' scoring is good enough, and I keep saying that good enough again, good enough not to let the defense and the goaltending down. And that's my concern with these Islanders going into the playoffs.
Agreed. And we know the talent's there, with the Zizegas and the Matt Barzal stepping up, J.G. Pageau as well. Those three in particular really, balling or playing hard this season. But at the same time, you need, again, those third and fourth line guys to step up, especially in the playoffs. Time and time again, the team that makes it all the way, we saw the Lightning last year, is there are no weaknesses. Any line is a threat. And for the Isles, they got, again, a lot of good young talent. But at the same time, you got guys like Clutterbuck or Matt Martin or Komarov who are a negative on the ice when they're there. Or even Dow Cole. He played 26 games, and he was only able to muster up 4 points on the season. I mean, if you're going to be a bottom six guy, you got to match up, especially with the talent the Penguins and the Caps have on the third and fourth lines. Because the Penguins and the Caps are 1 and 2 in goals scored on the season. They don't waste shots. They have 2 of the 3 best shooting percentages in the league. Even though the Isles are great, they're the best team in terms of preventing teams from scoring. They only surrender about 2.2 goals per game. And Varlamov tops the NHL with his 7 shutouts. You're not going to get that in the playoffs if your third and fourth, your bottom 6 don't step up. And defensively as well, if you're bottom 4, if they don't step up. To me,
that's where
really
we stand right now.
Yeah,
First of all,
really
they got to beat Boston and lock down the 3. But actually, it doesn't matter. Does it matter really who they face, either Washington or Pittsburgh? Their prospects are, yes, they can beat either one of them. All they need is a hot goalie, good defense. But both these teams have a lot of firepower. And look, I'll take whatever they can give me. They gave me a run to the conference final last year, which was the first time they got that deep in the playoffs since 1993. They're entirely capable of doing it again. But they got beat by the eventual Cup champion who outscored them. And that is going to be a problem. That is going to be their need long term, more scoring.
Truthfully, they're going to need, I'm sure Zach would agree with me, they're going to need the Everly and Barzal in particular, maybe a little really step up in scoring, because there's a lot of, for the team's top scorers, they are just as efficient in the assist column as they are scoring. And obviously that's not a problem, especially not in a regular season. But in terms of having that one dynamic playmaker, look at Stony Brook Lacrosse, just to make that comparison. We talked about with Dylan Palonetti. He's a great scorer, and the big complaint was that he wasn't selfish, that he didn't take, that even though he took a lot of shots, he could have taken more shots and taken more of an opportunity to play an individual role. Obviously, he didn't do that, and it worked out fine for most of the season for Stony Brook. But again, it showed come postseason time that it was one of the things that burnt them, where he was shut down for a lot of that game. You can't afford to have Barzell or Eberle or Brock Nelson in particular, who's leading the way with 18 goals, to get shut down during the postseason, and they're going to be put on Pittsburgh and Washington's best 4 defenders.
Yeah,
that's
no
right.
doubt about that.
Well, so, it was a rough week for New York hockey, but for the first time all year, really, I think we could say it was a pretty positive week for both New York baseball teams, right? I think that the Yankees are finally getting better. Matt, you said it last week. I asked you what the biggest difference was because the Yankees are finally playing better, and you said that, they got to play the Orioles and the Tigers. But, you can only play who you're scheduled for. And this past week, the Yankees went 4-2. They took 2 of 3 from the hated Astros. Absolutely hated.
You want to talk about
atmosphere there.
Yeah, you want to talk about contentious settings. We spoke about it here at Joe Nathan Field today. That
was amplified.
Put that volume on 500. And, make everything 1,000 times larger. That was the Astros, and well-deserved, by the way.
Yes,
The fact that Astro fans could think that this wasn't coming to them, it's laughable. I mean,
it really is. And it's funny. I have some older Yankee friends who have been going to their games every single night, and every single night they went to those 3 Yankees-Astros games, and they were recording it and posting it on their Snapchat stories. And every night, leaving the stadium, coming into the stadium, there was just a stadium-wide cheer. FL Tuve, da, 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 da.
I can't say what the F means, but it's not a nice thing.
Yes, fudge, of course. And,
good save.
And that... I'm amazed that the Astros were able to salvage that series with the amount of negative energy against them. I mean, that could not have been more of a road game. Even
I don't think
the crowds at whatever it is, 1/3 capacity, that was just... I have seen some stand-up comics tell some really offensive jokes that bombed, and I have never seen a wave of hatred like the Houston Astros got this past week.
I think Matt would agree. Really, it was reminiscent of those Yankee Red Sox games from about 03 to 05, especially at Fenway. I'm thinking in particular with A-Rod and Veritek getting in it. And obviously Pedro Martinez and Don Zimmer. Having choice words.
Yes,
and,
yeah.
Oh, those teams hated each other, and their fans did too.
Yeah.
And
we're seeing that here with the Yankees.
This is not just about rivalry, obviously. And it's not just about the Yankees, although the Yankees, of course, were the most notable recipients of the Houston cheating tactics in 2017. It's also the whole league. They are, everywhere they go, they're getting it. And one sign I saw that they showed on TV was, I think it was something to the effect of, what, you thought we forgot?
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, that was great. That summed up everything perfectly.
It's funny you said that, Matt, because if you guys remember back to when life was normal, because life was normal up until about March of 2020. So we had a spring training in 2020. Well, we had at least half a spring training in 2020, and the Astros play in the Grapefruit League with the Mets, and I believe the Yankees. I think the Yankees are in the Grapefruit League too.
Yes, they are.
And I mean, the Astros led the league in hit by pitch, like offensively. Their batters got hit more in the 15 spring training games of 2020.
Let me tell you this. During the peak of the Yankee-Red Sox rivalries, you were saying 03 to 05, 06, and so on and so forth.
The recent peak. There's a lot of peaks.
Yeah. Well, one peak in particular under manager Terry Francona. Okay, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. My opinion, future Hall of Fame manager Tito Francona.
I think so, too. But what I will say is that the Red Sox pitchers threw at the Yankees a lot more than Joe Torre's Yankees threw at the Red Sox. And two guys in particular that they threw at a lot. Jeter and A-Rod.
Yeah.
Now, everybody said, I have way too much respect for Jeter. Like hell. They went after him just as much as they hated A-Rod for two reasons. One, because everybody hates A-Rod.
Because
And number
he
two-
gave him a reason to hate.
Oh, boy.
And number two,
Yeah.
you have to remember, in 2003, the offseason, between 03 and 04, the Red Sox were trying to trade Manny Ramirez to get A-Rod.
That's right.
And the money didn't line up. Somebody was going to get paid for not playing, essentially. Because A-Rod was making too much money, even though what ended up happening was that Manny stayed, and A-Rod went to the Yankees because the Yankees had Alfonso Soriano, and the trade just fit better money-wise.
Yeah.
And that's why the Yankees ended up with A-Rod instead of the Red Sox. A-Rod was trying to take a pay cut to go to Boston, but the players' union wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep,
Yeah.
they wouldn't allow it. I still remember because I was working for MLB.com at the time. I was working the overnight desk. And the overnight desk in the off-season is the busiest. Overnight is the busiest time in the off-season in baseball because that's when all the weird stories come up. They put Manny on waivers. That came as a complete surprise to everybody. What? So as the story was developing, this whole A-Rod deal, I had to monitor this thing. So one day, I'm getting off shift. The morning people come in, and I get on the elevator, and A-Rod is on it. What the? Well, as it turns out, MLB Productions was in the same building. The Chelsea Market, by the way, in case anybody's wondering. So he was going up as I was about to come down. So what we tried to do is get him for an interview, and he wouldn't talk. He was basically didn't want to say anything until some kind of deal was made. But right in the middle of that, I'm like, what, am I dreaming? Did I fall asleep early or something like that? See A-Rod in the elevator.
Yeah, that's
Weird.
funny. Yeah, my hitting trainer was in the Seattle Mariners farm system, and he was with their spring training teams, and the spring training teams were A-Rod and Griffey and Edgar
Martinez.
Yeah,
Incredible trade.
Yeah.
John Rude. Yeah, so I mean, when even Randy Johnson, I think, might have been there at that point. And he's telling me this stuff like, just nonchalantly, and I'm like, dude, like you were in the same
with big guys
as all these revolutionary players, including the most polarizing of the past couple of years. I mean, who has been more divisive than Alex Rodriguez?
Up until then, I'd say now it's the Astros and really Correa. And
no, I meant individual. No, Alex Rodriguez is totally the most.
Probably still A-Rod, but again, bringing it back to
even as an announcer, I mean,
look,
and again,
when the opposing fans would boo A-Rod, the Yankee fans would just shrug their shoulders.
Yeah, they'd be like, it happens. I feel you.
Yeah.
Can't get mad at that.
But 2009
anyway.
changed everything.
Yeah.
2009, A-Rod had a great postseason.
Yeah.
And I give Kate Hudson all the credit. He was dating her at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, we talk about
when they won the World Series in the clubhouse, Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn were hanging out. It was great.
Yeah, well, it's funny. They say that earlier that year, Alex Rodriguez threw a birthday party and the whole team was invited. And apparently it was such a good team bonding experience for all of them that they believe that actually helped them form some more strong cohesion between all of them. They feel as though that may have been one of the turning points in their season, which
Absolutely.
I'm not totally buying, but I
signing
guess
Sabathia to Shero was the turning point of that season. In the last season.
And we bring it back again to what's happening now, just because that, to me, it feels like that's what Correa and Altuve, all of these offenders, I think is what they're going to need to kind of alleviate the pressure that is now applied to the rest of the Astro teams. Because again, you got to realize this was happening 2 to 4 years ago. So a lot of the players have been traded or released or retired. So really, there's only 4 or 5 players that were, especially on the batting side, who were a part of that scandal. Problem is, they're the 4 or 5 stars, like Correa again, Altuve, the big
so
two.
they've
They're
got
4-4, so to speak.
Exactly.
they've got Correa,
And-
Altuve, Gurriel, Bregman, and then they've
Yes,
got
there you go.
Springer's gone. Yeah, that's true. I
Springer's
think
in Toronto.
Josh Reddick's gone.
Yeah, he's in
Beltran's
Oakland, I believe.
retired. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. How many players they've lost? Marwin Gonzalez is gone. Yeah, that's true.
And again, we talk about that because, again, looking at the team, they're actually so far, they're 18-16. They're behind the Athletics. But again, it's close to AL West. They could easily be behind the Mariners and Rangers by tomorrow.
Yeah. Well,
So again, this is a team where the Yankees needed, again, to make that statement, with this being the first real, matchup since then. And I think they delivered it well for the most part. Again, a big 7-3 win and 6-3 win. I think, there's a bad mark that was set, losing and giving up a big bomb to Altuve. Kind of shows that, he still got the talent, and we respect that. But at the same time, I think really that series, sparked something for the Yankees. And you saw a lot more heart and determination on the team that just wasn't there last time. And really, I think there's no better example than the past 2 days. Okay, there were 0 walk-offs for the Yankees throughout the first 32 games. They just won on back-to-back walk-off hits from Gleyber Torres' bloop single that miraculously found the hole, and Stanton,
that was a dribbler, wasn't it?
A dribbler, there you go, yeah. And Stanton, who has really improved his game, hitting the RBI single to give the Yankees a 4-3 win today.
Yeah. Now it should, yes, and what you're talking about is they, after taking 2 of 3 from the Astros, they took 2 of 3 from the Washington Nationals. Now, again, it should be noted. It has to be noted. Okay, Matt pointed this out last week. I have to point it out now. Okay, the Nationals are not a good team, and they are a competitive team, but they're not a good team. Okay, they're under 500. I think they're 13-17 now.
I wouldn't say they're I wouldn't say they're not a good team. I think they're hitting their bump early, and this is going to test them. I think everyone in that NL East team is a good team, and they're all going through different peaks and valleys. We're going to talk about the Mets in about 5 minutes, and the week they've had, perfect example of that.
Yeah, it was a good week.
At the same time, this was the Yankees' time to step up because they were hitting that valley, and now they're rising again. And Stanton, I think, is the perfect example of that. I mean, let's look at his first 15 games for a second, guys. He was hitting well below 200. Okay, his slash line is 158, 238, a 333 on base percentage. His last 15 games, he's hitting over 400. He's got 6 home runs. He's driven home 12 runners, and he's hit in virtually every game since Boone moved him up to the number 2 spot. And analytics-wise, you think Stanton is the number 2? Are you insane? But somehow Stanton is making it work. And he, not single-handedly, but you could see that there was a spark in the Yankees offense that just wasn't there at the start of the season. We ranted about it at the start of the season, and the Yankees look like they're back on a roll. And this is a good time for them to do it, as the Red Sox are trying to pull away from the rest of the division at a 22-13 record.
Yeah, and the thing is too is they also won some ugly games. Like the last 2 games were not like particularly well played games. I mean today they only had 5 hits, but they were opportunistic enough to get that win, right? They still have a low team batting average. Really, the only ones hitting are LeMahieu and Stanton, which is, again, as you said, raging hot right now. This is the best streak we've seen Stanton on probably since his MVP season. I mean, it's only what is it, like a 12-game stretch? So I guess
15.
That's 15 game. Okay, so I guess it's a little unfair for me to say that, but we haven't seen Stanton hit this efficiently, this consistently in a Yankees uniform, maybe since his first year here. And even then, he still somehow managed to disappoint Yankees fans enough just because of all the strikeouts. Coming off of an MVP season, he had a much lower batting average.
Well,
but still, this could really have been a turning point in the Yankees season. I believe if they had lost that series to the Astros, they would have revolted. They would have revolted. Because
there would be riots at Yankee Stadium for sure.
I've never seen that much anger in a stadium And again, they're only 33% filled. and just the pressure they put on those Astros players. It was great that the Yankees won for their fan base. Now let's talk about the other New York team.
Well, just before that, I do want to preview. Like, I want to bring Matt in for a second too. Is just that the Astro series was really important, but realistically, I think in terms of long-term season projection, this Rays series coming up this week, Monday through Wednesday, or I think Tuesday or Thursday, is really going to be the test for them because they were mopped by the Rays at the start of the season when they were really struggling coming out the gate.
Yeah, and all
exactly. I totally agree. Now, always remember, it's early May. Always have to keep that in perspective. But the good news is that I believe that the Rays will be facing a different Yankee team from what they faced a few weeks ago. And
that's big. There's a lot of the same players.
Yankees are starting to, again, might be a little premature saying so, but winning games on bloop singles is what they really needed. Something to reinforce to them that they don't have to rely on the long ball all the time, that they should maybe just try putting the ball in play a little bit more. They still strike out too much. Those Astros,
lead the league in that.
There's one very important reason why the Astros, before everybody found out they were cheating, were glorified so much. Because first of all, the team was built from scratch.
Right.
And of course, George Springer was on the cover of Sports Illustrated 2 years ahead of time, predicting that they win the World Series in 2017.
Yeah.
But the reason why, and again, could be part cheating or could be change in approach. I think it's a mixture of both.
Yeah,
their total strikeouts went down from leading the league to among the fewest. It was a similar transformation the Islanders underwent in their defense. Worst defensive team to best.
Right,
so,
even the Knicks.
Cutting down on the strikeouts will do a world of good for this team. I remember what I also said on social media. I cited Aaron Judge as the example, but you take a look at Hideki Matsui's Japan record versus U.S. record. Again, triple digits in strikeouts in 130-game seasons in Japan, double digits in 162-game seasons in the United States. That was a conscious move on his part to shorten his swing to become a reliable RBI man. And I think that Judge, if he gets to do that, if he's able to do that, is going to be better off in the long term and maybe get that big payoff he's looking for.
Yeah, maybe. But, the thing is Aaron Judge has to get – I was calling him on this a couple weeks ago. He has to get a clutch hit one day, okay? He does not have a long list. He has a very, very short list. It's not a laundry list. It's a receipt of clutch hits. He has 0 career walk-off RBIs. Now, let me put that into perspective for you. Pat Mazeika, the catcher that the Mets just called up, still did not have his first major league hit, has more walk-off RBIs than Aaron Judge in his career.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You never even think about that. But then you take a look at a guy, and I was just looking at his stats for fun. Take a look at a guy like David Ortiz. Go into Baseball Reference. First of all, you still have to wonder why the hell he retired when he did. Because if you look at that last year, he could have gone on a bit further. I mean, his final year as a DH, 151 games, led the league in RBIs with 127, 38 home runs, and batted .315.
How many doubles
That was
did he
his
hit?
last year at age 40.
Yeah.
And led with 48 doubles.
Yes. And think about how big he is.
Led the
too.
majors.
So
with 48 doubles.
Think about how well he had to hit the ball to hit that many doubles because he's so, he was so
240, 245.
Yeah.
But the point was, how many walk-off home runs did he have?
Oh
yeah,
God.
I just in that one 2004 ALCS alone, and then you got Aaron
I'm talking
Judge.
05. He was doing it every day
Yeah,
in the regular season. They got knocked out in the division series that year, but people feel he got overlooked for MVP. Never won an MVP, by the way.
No,
should have.
Didn't have to.
World Series MVP at least.
Yeah.
But he never won a regular season MVP.
Right. He had like a 688 batting average in that World Series. 3-time World Series champ, 3-0 in the World
Incredible.
Series. Yep.
Yeah, and I know, Mike, you want to talk about the Mets as well because then they're on an incredible run this week. After, they're slumped, winning 5 straight.
Right. Yeah, and the thing is too, they went 5-2 overall this week. They haven't had to play a lot of very good teams. I mean, one team who looks good but really isn't is Philadelphia. They sometimes for a couple minutes in the day are in first place, and then they do something to themselves to make them fall. The Mets are 6-3 against the Phillies, but they traveled down to St. Louis this past week to play what is a pretty good Cardinals team. That Cardinals team was in first place. I think they were 16-11 when the Mets took over. I don't know, Ken. Do you know what their exact record?
Just about there. That's right.
I think it was 16-12. Well, right now they're 21-14 after shutting out the Rockies today. They actually swept the Rockies. They were. Hold on. Now we got this right here. Cardinals, Mets. They were 16-12 when the Mets went down there to face them, and they were in first place. And the Cardinals won the first 2 games of that series, but the Mets did a good job coming back, and they split that series. Game 2 was rained out, so it was rescheduled for a day-night doubleheader. They lost the first game of that doubleheader. They won the nightcap, and then they won the 4th and final game of the series to split 2-2. And then they came home to face a team who's a lot like the Nationals, who I was just knocking. The Diamondbacks, again, not a good team, but very competitive. They were 500 right before they got to the Mets. The Mets swept them. 3 close games. None of them came easily. A lot of bullpen work. I mean, Tommy Hunter, who they just called up from the major leagues, went 2 innings in his Mets debut and then started the next game because they went with a bullpen game and gave them 2 innings. Jacob Barnes today, I think he got them 4 outs or 5 outs. He had a 16-pitch at-bat at one point with Pavin Smith, and he won it with a strikeout. Edwin Diaz got a 5-out save today. Jairus Familia last night, I think he gave them a 5-out hold. They got a lot of things from the bullpen, which they really needed.
And remember, at the start of the season, the Mets had one of the worst bullpens in terms of ERA for the first couple of weeks. Currently, since April 22nd.
For the first week, it was, yeah.
Right. Since April, though, the Mets have the best bullpen ERA in the MLB, when the Marlins right after them.
Yeah. Well, it should be noted, too, that, like, at that point in the season, the Mets were, like, a week behind everyone else, because the Mets had the opening series canceled, and then they had, like, 3 other rainouts and snow.
Okay. I think really the biggest story, too, for the Mets is Lindor and McNeil.
Yes, yeah, we have to mention this. You see, so Francisco Lindor notoriously went 0 for 26. He hadn't had a hit in 2 weeks. In his last at-bat of the last game in St. Louis, he hits a single, breaks up the streak. Good for him, okay? Now, game 1 of that Diamondback series, they're losing 4-0. They're losing 4-2 now, going into the bottom of the, the 7th inning? The 7th inning, okay? And there's some commotion. The SNY broadcast shows on replay Michael Conforto and Dominic Smith walking back into the dugout. Right before they get into the dugout, they peek down the dugout tunnel. They hear something. They've got some serious looks on their face. They sprint into the tunnel, and then the rest of the team follows them to the tunnel. There was obviously something going on down there. According to Francisco Lindor in the post-game interview, he thought he saw a rat. Jeff McNeil said it was a raccoon, and they argued about it. Now, there are some people, including in the Mets organization, who believe that was BS. That was
Luis Rojas says
yes,
that.
Like Luis Rojas.
Everybody believes it was BS.
Like the manager, the general manager. I mean, it was probably a fake story.
Everybody believes that was BS.
Yes, you know that it was probably a fake story when even your own, like, superiors won't back you, right? So, having said that, though, immediately after not knowing whether that animal was a rat or a raccoon, Francisco Lindor, batting right-handed, ties the game with a 2-run homer. The Mets would go on to win that game in extra innings when Pat Mazeika, the greatest player in MLB history, came up, bases loaded, hit a 40-foot dribbler to the right side. The glove flip by the pitcher was not in time. Walk-off run scores. And by the way, he did something similar today. Pinch hitting with the bases loaded. He drew a bases loaded walk. So he now has no hits, 1 time on base, 2 RBIs.
Incredible.
For his career.
I don't know.
Talk about productivity. Productivity, man.
I don't know what Lindor and McNeil went through in that dugout, but quite frankly, I think it should have happened a lot earlier.
Yeah,
maybe this is because the Mets fired Chili Davis and Tom Slater earlier in the week. But since his last 7 games, he's hitting .231. He's slugging .385. He has 6 hits, including that home run, as you said, 4 RBIs, and he only has 1 stolen base. But I mean, he stole home from first base.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, this dude is having his best week as a Met since spring training.
Right.
And I mean,
in spring training.
this is the guy that the Mets paid $330 million for. Okay, this is the guy you spend that big money for. This is a Lindor you got to see and produce for the Mets, and he keeps it up. The Mets are going to stay in first place as they are now, a game over Philly.
Yeah, and the thing is too, I know you went with 7 games because that signifies a week, but you could really just dumb it down to the last 5 games. You should go with just the winning streak. The numbers they've been even better, because the next night after hitting that home run, he hit a double off the dead center field wall. I mean, he crushed that ball, and then he hit a clutch RBI single to extend their lead in the bottom of the 8th inning. And yes, he had that stolen base, which caused the throwing error, and then he got up and scored from second on a throwing error by the catcher. So yeah, he's been making a lot of things happen. But the thing with Lindor too is you knew he was going to hit eventually. Okay, he's too good a hitter for him not to turn it around. But Lindor brings an intensity to him and an attitude to him, a good attitude, and a positivity to him that just not a lot of players do. And the Mets, remember Jose Reyes and how vibrant and young and lively he was, and how that dugout was always having fun with young David Wright and young Carlos Beltran and
young Carlos Delgado,
and they were getting the most out of an older Carlos Delgado. It's like that with Lindor and Stroman and Alonso and McNeil. Those are some really energetic and enthusiastic guys. And by the way, I mentioned last week that Conforto was raking. Conforto had a bit of a weird series in St. Louis, but he's still getting on base a lot. I mean, his batting average dipped a little since the time we last spoke, but he is such a reliable on-base guy, and he had a big day today, 2 for 4 with an RBI single. He's another one who's turning it around. And McNeil homered too, by the way. We were talking about Lindor and how he played well after this fight. McNeil homered last night, hit a 2-run line drive shot into the bullpen. So, a lot of guys are turning it around, and then they're about to get Brandon Nimmo back. We have neglected to mention this, though. We have neglected to mention this. Jacob deGrom had his start skipped last time out because he had right side tightness. Today he pitched pretty well. It was a down performance by his standards because it wasn't a complete game 2-hit shutout where he had 2 hits and stuff like that. But he left today's start after 5 innings with some more right side tightness. So he's getting an MRI. We'll hold our breath till that. He'll probably be okay, but right now, I would consider, if I were the Mets, shutting him down for a whole 2 weeks. I mean, the pitching has been so good around him. The bullpen's been locked down. Stroman's good. Taijuan Walker. How about Taijuan Walker?
What a start he's had.
He's awesome. David Peterson had a terrible last start. He couldn't find home plate, but David Peterson's talented. He's fine. He'll be okay. You could rely on these guys. Shut down deGrom for a little bit. The bullpen is strong. Okay, you'll be perfectly fine. The Mets are fine. Honestly, the biggest threat it's not the biggest threat to the Mets, so that was a stupid thing to say. But it should be noted, despite the Marlins being 15-18 this year, the Marlins are good.
Just like last year, the record fooled a lot of people, but there's a lot of young prospects that are good. step up for Miami.
They are the only NL East team right now with a positive run differential, and it's plus 20. Like, it's not just a plus 1 or plus 2. It's not just inflated by one blowout. No, like, they're good. They're good. When they win handily. When they lose, they barely lose. They're good. They're scrappy. They pitch well. They get timely hits. They play decent defense. They're good. They're going to be scrappy. They're going to spoil someone's season. Like they did the Mets those last 2 years.
07, 08.
Playing at Shea Stadium, yeah. So hopefully if you're the Mets, you're not in that type of position this time when September rolls around. But keep an eye on them.
And again, with 5 minutes to go, we'll just quickly switch to basketball. Talk more about the next week as the season wraps up. But I mean, you're talking about two good teams, New York sports teams we see in baseball. How about the Nets and Knicks? Knicks especially, who I think shocked everyone by having a season almost as good as Brooklyn. Both teams in the top 4 of the East standings, and both with the opportunity to host at the very least one playoff round, in the Nets' case 2, this postseason. Yeah, definitely.
The Nets, there was a bit of a prove-it moment for the Nets last night. The Nets lost 4 games in a row, all to pretty good teams, and back-to-back to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, that's not good, okay? And then they lost another close game to the Dallas Mavericks. Again, if you want to win a title, you're going to have to beat good teams. The Nets have beaten good teams all year up until that point. And then it was kind of looking like deja vu again on Saturday. The Nuggets were plus 15 in the first half. The Nets were trailing by 15 going into the locker room. They came all the way back. They won it by 6. They got the Nuggets in foul trouble. I think the Nuggets were over the limit with like 5 minutes left. KD had a big night. Kyrie had a big night. And, there is this thing that I want to point out. They're barely losing to the Bucks and to the Mavericks. I mean, 6 points to the Bucks, 4 points to the Mavericks. Well, guess what? There is that one guy, James Harden, who still isn't back yet. I think James Harden accounts for more than 4 to 6 points. So with James Harden healthy, I'm pretty sure the Nets win those games. I'm still not wavering on my pick for who comes out of the East this year. And guess what? The Lakers kind of suck. They kind of suck.
They are weaker.
If the Lakers get themselves eliminated, and the Nets get past the Sixers, I think it's a cakewalk. I think
speaking of which, if the season ended today, Lakers and Warriors in the play-in round.
Yeah. And LeBron James is not happy about the play-in scenario like it was last season.
Right. Despite him being happy about it last season, which is,
Well, you're not happy.
You're not happy about it. Play better.
Yeah. Well, we know Joe's not really happy with LeBron because of his attitude.
That's true.
Well, LeBron's in favor of everything until it affects him.
And quickly again, as Zach, I know you want to say, for the Knicks especially, you can't count them out. Julius Randle named the Eastern Conference Player of the Month. He's averaging 27 months, 10 rebounds last month.
What they did against the Clippers today after falling back-to-back to Denver and Phoenix was really astounding. Derrick Rose rising up big time is really showing that the Knicks were the true winners in that Detroit Pistons.
20, agreed.
And now, and I think the way I see it with the playoff scenario for Tuesday, because of what they're going to do as well as Boston, if the Knicks win and the Celtics lose, then I think that is going to be what the Knicks need once and for all to avoid the play-in tournament and capture their first playoff berth since 2012.
Well, I think they're steering clear of that play-in tournament. The most dangerous team in that Eastern Conference play-in tournament very well might be the Russell Westbrook-led Washington Wizards. And I know that sounds
they're
stupid.
They're knife right now.
But, that...
They had to claw their way up. And again, the Knicks, 1 game ahead of the Hawks and the Heat for 4th place. Again, the right to host that first-round matchup. D. Rose, as you said, Zach, 25 points, 8 rebounds, and 31 minutes coming off the bench. It's remarkable what Tom Thibodeau has done. And absolutely remarkable, again, to have 2 pretty awesome basketball teams for once. Instead of the usually 2 awful teams, it's fun to watch. But we got a fun schedule for you coming up on WSB this week, Zach.
Yeah, just
Exactly.